Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ara Topouzian. I'm the Executive Director for Michigan Venture Capital Association, and I am here with our current board chair, Mr. Michael Gross. He's with Beringea. And today, Michael and I are going to kind of recap the 2021 year. We did this last year, and it was very well received, and we wanted to do this one more time. And we wanted to really share some of the highlights and what's been going on, not only in the Michigan community, but certainly with MVCA. First off, I would like to thank our platinum sponsor today, which is GM Ventures. Very thankful for their continued involvement. And I'd like to acknowledge the service providers. You saw the video a little bit before, just we got on screen, and certainly a number of them were featured. But real quickly, JFE Rate, Hoover and Weiss, Varnum, Bodman, Frost, Brown, and Todd, Gunderson Detmer, Pepper Hamilton, Bank of Ann Arbor, Fishman Stewart IP, Kerr Russell, Plant Moran, Warner Norcross and Judd, and Atomic Object. So we thank all of our service provider sponsors for their dedication to not only MVCA but the work that they do. All right. So without further ado, Michael, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thanks for having me, Ara.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. So, Michael, the last time we held this review, there was a lot of uncertainty as the pandemic was early on, and different from other crisis situations that the VC community had faced. And so this was, new waters for a lot of us. And last year we felt that VC activity was stronger than what was expected. As we look at another year, how do you feel about how the Michigan VC community is managed throughout the pandemic?
Yeah, thanks, Ara. It's interesting. Last year when we were together, we did feel like we were right in the thick of the pandemic, and now we find ourselves together again in this format, and I feel like we're still right in the thick of the pandemic. So definitely not out of the woods yet. But if you recall our conversation last year, we did feel good about the resiliency of the VC community and the startup ecosystem in Michigan, but we did have some questions about how strong the data would be coming out of 2020. Right. And I think when we completed our research report, we felt very good about the data. We had another really strong year in 2020 despite the pandemic. And we also had a lot of questions going into 21 on how much the pandemic would continue to affect fundraising. And I feel like we had a really active year. So, of course, things opened up a bit. I think there was a lot of pent-up demand for capital rounds coming out of 2020. Even though we had strong data, there were a lot of companies that said, hey, we're going to do an small insider bridge round, and we're going to focus on our results for 20 and go out for a larger round in 2021. And I think we saw that. We saw some really, really large rounds get completed in the state this year. So again, really pleased with the resiliency of the community, and another 2 strong years in a row, despite the headwinds from the pandemic.
Yeah. Michael, when we talk about, seed and large rounds, for funding for startups this past year, can you share some examples that represent these different stages and maybe what industries those that are being funded?
Yeah, sure. And I think from seed to the mega rounds, we had strength across all sizes and categories of types of rounds. Maybe I'll start on the larger end. We had a number of really blockbuster rounds completed in 2021. A few of those to highlight: Work It Health, of course, raised $118 million Series C at a $500 million valuation. So just a fantastic round for a really strong up and coming company in the state. Strata Oncology had a $90 million round, which is another company that's hitting its stride, another mega round. We had OneStream Software at $200 million, and that company was valued at $6 billion in that round. And of course, StockX with a $255 million round. It feels like every year we're highlighting StockX in these events because they just continue to grow and raise larger and larger rounds. So really good momentum on the Megaround side.
Mhm.
And then when we look in kind of the bread and butter of the VC community, it's those $10 to $30 million rounds.
Right.
And historically, those have been a big deal. And, we're always thrilled to have a few of those in any given year. In this year, we had more than 10 rounds greater than 10 million in the state. And I'll rattle through some of them. Autobooks at 25 million for their Series B, Blumira at 10.3 million, Acadium Life Sciences, 17.5 million Series B. Floyd announced their 15 million Series B. Orbion with a $20 million Series B. FlexTech Surgical at 13 million for a growth round. Airspace Link, $10 million early stage round. HealthBridge, 14.16 million, another scale round. Light Guide came in at 15 million and Sky Specs with 10.6 million. So I'm sure there are more than that. Those are the ones that were highlighted in our survey. And I think what's interesting when you look at that cohort of companies in that really significant $10 million plus round, it's across industries. There's, of course, a lot of life sciences and healthcare, as we always have in the state of Michigan. You've got space, direct to consumer, B2B SaaS, and AI and network security. So really good breadth of industries for those rounds, and also a lot of different stages. While we focus on the size of the round being in that 10 to 20 plus range, some of those $10 million rounds were essentially seed rounds, really early stage rounds. And I think that's a healthy signal for the ecosystem when you've got emerging companies in their first large institutional round raising 10 million plus. Then, of course, on the seed side, we had a lot of really strong activity again this year in 2021. And there are too many to name because they're smaller rounds and there were quite a few. But the activity on the seed side is a great leading indicator for future years and the strength of activity in future years. And I feel like we're really well positioned coming out of 2021.
Michael, to your point that this is kind of like a highlight reel, we're just going to try and touch on some. We're not going to be able to touch on every deal. I would remind or tell our viewers or maybe watching something like this for the first time that you can go to our website at michiganvca.org and sign up to get what we started this last year, which is a deal flow newsletter. And it's a quarterly email blast that we send out. There's no cost to it. And we try to include everything in there. Good news, funding rounds, and exits and all that kind of stuff. So sign up for those and you'll be able to see what's going on. So Michael, I said exit. So we talked about funding rounds. Let's talk about some of those exits. What are some of the impressive ones you've seen this past year?
Yeah, and if you recall, we had great exit activity in 2020 despite the pandemic, and really strong activity again this year. A few to highlight: Swift Biosciences out of Ann Arbor was acquired by IDT, another strong life sciences exit for the state. Kinetica Labs was acquired by Velocity EHS. Sportsman Tracker out of Grand Rapids was acquired. A great exit for that company that was really an up-and-coming company in the state. Beringea with a $300 million sale to Beringea Capital. And again, that's the company. So they sold to a private equity group, but we would expect them to continue to grow and thrive in the state. Rivian had their IPO, which is a great opportunity for the ecosystem, and another company that's continued to thrive. So a lot of good exits this year. And I think when we look at the VCs in the state, they also had a lot of strong exit activity for their portfolio out of state. And I think that's important to highlight because it's good for our local VCs to continue to build that track record and continue to raise capital and attract capital to the Michigan ecosystem. So another strong year for exits.
Yeah, definitely. And, we certainly read about, the bigger deals that go on and the bigger exits. And, I often get asked the question about unicorns. It seems to be the crystal ball question of, what is our next unicorn, or who is it going to be? Maybe walk us through a little bit where you think that's going, because we're seeing bigger deals and we're seeing bigger exits. So it's obvious to think that we will see some more kind of unicorns moving on. So tell me about what you think the next big unicorn would be for Michigan.
Well, I think it's important to appreciate that, StockX and OneStream are already there, right? Those companies are well on their way to being decacorns, in addition to Rivian already hitting that threshold. So, when you look, we had Duo and LlamaSoft, and now we have StockX and Rivian and OneStream. That's a consistent track record of unicorns emerging from our startup ecosystem. And I think it shows that that's a sustainable trend. So when you say, where's the next one going to come from? You can look at that list of deals that we highlighted, and just looking in this year alone, you look at Work It Health. That deal was done at what was reported as a $500 million valuation. Those investors certainly came into that round at that valuation, fully expecting that to be a unicorn in the near future. And so, we've got real examples of companies underwriting that in our state. I think the same with Strata Oncology, which, $90 million round. I don't know the exact valuation of that round, but, that's a post-money value where those investors are expecting that to be a really sizable company. And so I think you look across even those companies that were in the $10 to $25 million round range. I know some of them are sitting at post-money valuations north of 100 million. And when investors are backing those companies at that level, they're expecting multiples on their money. And so they're expecting those to be unicorns as well, or some cohort of those. So I think if we look at the track record over the last few years, some of these larger rounds getting done, there are a whole host of companies that could emerge as that next cohort of unicorns in the state.
And how important is that for the state of Michigan? I mean, are unicorns a necessity? What do you think about that?
Yeah, of course, it's important, and I think it's important that we've had a number of them, and we're confident we're going to continue. And it's important because, those exits happen, those companies still continue to grow in the state. They don't leave when they reach that status. The employees do well. They then move on to start their next company and have confidence in the startup ecosystem and cycle. And so you've got more companies formed. The VCs get great exits. They're able to raise more capital and fund more companies. And that virtuous cycle of company formation continues. And so it's really important to have them. We feel extremely fortunate with the success over the last few years. And I think it shows in the activity on the seed and early stage side that we're starting to see companies sprout up out of those previous unicorns.
Right. So we know that when firms fundraise, the result means success for the startup community. And can you share some of the new funds that have emerged this last year, as well as maybe some of the existing ones that have done some great fundraising?
Yeah, I think there were some really important fundraising developments across stages in the state. And a few of those I highlight. We were really thrilled to see Renaissance Venture Capital raise their fourth fund at, I think, 77.5 was the announcement there. And what Renaissance is doing with their Undemo days and really stimulating the ecosystem has had a tremendous benefit. I think in their press release, they stated that since 2008, when they were formed, they've attracted over $2 billion in capital to Michigan companies, or helped attract $2 billion. And so it's great to see them continue that, and to see Undemo days really as that cornerstone of the investment community and able to catalyze so many rounds. We also had an announcement that I think was a little under the radar for some folks, but the Michigan Small and Emerging Manager Program was launched. That's a $300 million program launched in collaboration with the Whitmer administration and Treasury and the state of Michigan retirement system.
Right.
And the goal there is to back small and emerging managers in the state. And, that's a really large initiative, and I think a great thing to launch in the last year. Then at Beringea, we raised our fourth fund, MGCP 4. So we'll continue to back exciting growth companies in Michigan and the Midwest. So obviously thrilled with that development. And U of M, with their Accelerate Blue Fund, announced they reached their first fundraising target of $2 million. They also made their first 2 investments, so important early stage fund launching out of U of M. And then Michigan Rise, which is a collaboration between Michigan Economic Development Corporation and MSU, announced an additional $6.5 million in funding for Michigan Rise. And they also highlighted in the first year, they invested $3.7 million in 26 companies. Those companies then went on to raise an additional $101.2 million. So you see the value of those early stage funds, and they're able to back so many companies at the stage where they really need that critical funding to start up. And then we're seeing the results of those companies raising the larger rounds, often from in-state investors and also out-of-state investors.
So we can't have this discussion without talking about talent, right? I mean, it really has to be part of every discussion when we talk about the success of the startup community. So we know the importance of having talent. The debate sometimes seems to be, does Michigan have the exceptional wealth of talent in the state? Do you feel that the executive talent, that we have that here to drive the success for these startups and invested communities? I mean, we've been reading probably more about this even lately, but what are your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's been one of the big questions we hear over and over again. Does Michigan have enough executive level talent to support a thriving startup community? And we saw some real developments in that area this year. A few to highlight. I'll put them in 2 categories. So one is kind of the homegrown or local entrepreneurs that are able to build a company and scale it. And we've had a number of examples of that this year. When you look at companies like Autobooks and Stephen Robert, and he was at Bill Highway before that, and scaling that company really well. Jason Raznick driving the $300 million exit for Beringea, and of course, we'll continue to grow that company. And then what Robin and Lisa are doing at Work at Health to go from startup to a $500 million valuation and raise over $100 million. I think those are all great examples of local CEOs that are able to grow and scale and attract out-of-state capital, in-state capital, raise multiple rounds, and ultimately drive exits. And so really, really great to see that. And then we also have the question of, will out-of-state talent come to Michigan? And I think that's a resounding yes as well. A few examples there. Delphinus Medical Technologies recently announced PMA approval, which is a critical milestone for that company to then scale their technology commercially. And that was really driven by Mark Forshey, a CEO that was recruited in from Silicon Valley. His last company was a $400 million exit for Kleiner Perkins. He could have joined any med tech startup anywhere in the country. Came to Michigan. He's thriving here, hitting really big milestones. And just last week, MemoryX, a promising startup in Ann Arbor, announced Keith Crescent as CEO. And Keith was running the AI chip division at Qualcomm, one of the largest chip companies in the world with unlimited budget to develop AI chips and, can really leverage a lot of resources. And he found more promise in an early stage startup in Michigan, decided to relocate here and drive that company. So when you look at those 2 trends together, both the local executive talent driving successful outcomes and the ability to recruit out of state, it really shows that I think we could stop asking ourselves the question whether we have executive talent that can support this ecosystem, but start asking ourselves how can we continue to develop that talent and continue to put programs in place to recruit that out-of-state talent when necessary.
If I could put a highlight over that last sentence, that would be definitely a plus. At our annual dinner that we had this past September, we were fortunate to include the Lieutenant Governor, Gilchrist, as our keynote presenter. Phenomenal for those that were in attendance that saw him. He was dynamic, hit it right on the head on all accounts. But what he had discussed was the importance of the VC community. And the Whitmer administration has been very supportive of initiatives which surround supporting the startup community. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that's worth highlighting.
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight, Ara. And of course, the Lieutenant Governor was fantastic at our annual awards dinner. And, he does those passionate speeches on entrepreneurship and startup being important to grow the economy. And he talks for 20 minutes with no note cards. And he's done it over and over again. And, you can really feel that he gets it and he feels it and he has conviction behind those viewpoints. And it's also great after seeing him speak like that to see it show up in policy and to see it show up in the initiatives coming from the administration. We talked about the Small and Emerging Managers Program, and that was funded by the state of Michigan retirement system. Great to see their continued support of Michigan, but in collaboration with the Whitmer administration. And, I think that was looking back at our years of leadership in putting funds like that together to catalyze the community and saying, what can we learn from our years of history and put, an additional program in place to support those emerging managers. We talked about Michigan Rise, a collaboration with the MEDC. And we've seen the MEDC over and over again collaborating with earlier stage funds and really stimulating those funds to invest at the seed level, which is critical to launch that next stage of startups for the ecosystem. So great to have MEDC continue to support that. And I think there's a lot of continued focus at MEDC on startups and entrepreneurship. And I think we'll see some great things in 2022 along those lines as well. And then with the American Rescue Plan, we saw Governor Whitmer's Startup Resiliency Initiative. And, that's $140 million for direct investments and fund of funds investments, as well as $50 million for grants to organizations that help provide services and support for startups and entrepreneurs. And so, you've got another almost $200 million proposed out of the American Rescue Plan directly for the VC ecosystem. Of course, there's still some work to do to finalize that, but you see the intention and you see the administration following through on those themes that Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist so eloquently summarized at our dinner.
Yeah, and it seems like we're seeing more and more as every day goes by. Toward the end of the year, you've got state legislators that are, pushing the issue of just kind of rebuilding this economy. I mean, it's definitely what we've got to do. So we're hoping for greater things to come for sure.
Yeah, and it is good to see, and it's good to see continuation of that legacy we have in Michigan. Yeah. A lot of the success we're seeing in the community now is the result of hard work over the last decade and programs that were put in place in 2008 through 2010 to help stimulate the ecosystem. And so these programs have been shown to work, and we had a little bit of a gap where other states in the Midwest launched some programs that were pretty innovative. And it's good to see us starting to think of taking that to the next level and re-engaging with some of those initiatives.
Right, definitely.
So, Ara, I've been doing a lot of the talking. I'll flip it over to you for this one. We've talked a lot about the ecosystem and the highlights of 2021, and we're excited about the positioning for 2022. Tell us a bit about the MVCA and some of our accomplishments in 21 and our plans for 2022.
Well, no, I'd be happy to. It's been certainly a busy couple of years. When you think about maybe 90% of my time here has been during the pandemic. I think, pretty proud of a lot of the work that we've been doing these last few years. But in particular, this was a real busy year, and it seems to fly by real quick. I mean, I think we've managed very well by doing these kinds of events. We were able to get back to doing some in-person events, networking events, and that's going to continue into the next year. We're going to be safe about it. We have been safe about it. The annual dinner was, as we talked a little bit earlier, kind of a tremendous success. And a lot of our advocacy work, too, I think is paying off. Adrian Fortino from Mercury is our advocacy chair. And Adrian and I had several meetings. Our committees have had several meetings with, state legislators and certainly Lieutenant Governor and the MEDC, and everybody seems to be rowing in the same direction. Membership grew a bit, and that's always, a wonderful thing. So I think we expect, quite a bit for next year. The one that I think we're particularly proud of is, we had developed a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. We had talked about this over a year ago. MVCA has always looked at diversity very seriously. The Venture Fellows program is the perfect example of going in the right direction for that. But then we've developed really this committee that it's not a siloed committee. So what we've got is the diversity committee membership is represented on all of our other MVCA subcommittees. And I think that's important. And that will continue to grow, so that we can integrate DE&I efforts into everything that we do. Membership thresholds were lowered for emerging members, investor members. So newer funds that are focusing 50% on diverse funds, we're giving free membership away. So we've definitely got a few members that fall under that. And
Ara, if I could interject, Of course, it's such an important area for us to focus on. It's so important for VC broadly because diverse populations have had such a strong impact on startups and the economy. And I'd like to thank Patty Glaza for her leadership on that committee. She's done a tremendous job launching that committee and working with the other committees to make sure that in all of our initiatives, we're thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and have it as a real focus.
Yeah, no, that's important to note. Some of the other efforts with this has included just really, disseminating more articles, more information via our newsletter or social media channels. We drafted a diversity charter statement as well. And we're already talking about what we're, going to be looking at, for next year. So I'm pretty proud of the work too, that this committee has done. And, I expect so much more, as we go into next year. So speaking of next year, as we're kind of wrapping this up, MVCA turns 20, if you could believe that. So I'm a little older. You and I are both a little older than MVCA, but we're excited that the next year is the 20th anniversary. And with that, it's going to come sort of new rebranding, brand new website. A few other things that we're looking at is we're going to be taking a new approach with our research report. And so look for that probably in spring of next year. Our annual dinner, I want to announce, is on September 29th. So I'm putting it out there. We're going back to Greenfield Village, so we're excited about that. And then finally, we created a 501c3 organization, a foundation called Michigan Venture and Entrepreneurial Foundation. And more of that definitely to come, but that's going to be, that's attached to MVCA as a side organization. There's going to be a lot of work that's going to go into that. So, I mean, really in this last 20 seconds that I have, I'll tell you a couple quick things. One, very excited about next year. But two, and very important, I want to publicly thank you, Michael. Many may not know, Michael, you were board chair for the past 2 years. We've passed the torch to Jeff Rangvelt from Renaissance. But I want to thank you for all the work and putting up with all my text, emails, and phone calls for these last couple of years. I know you're not going anywhere, but wanted to thank you for all that. And I certainly want to thank the entire board of directors for all of their support and efforts throughout the years. And then last but not least, Angela. Angela, part of my team, Angela Heflin, and she's somewhere in here behind the scenes and whatnot. And I want to thank her for her time and all of her efforts. So we've wrapped up, Michael. And so for everybody that is watching, here's what's next. You're going to log off of this screen, and you're going to go into your session screen. And we're going to pick this up and have kind of a casual Q&A where we can take some questions and hopefully give you some good answers for them. And if you don't join us, well, we'll wish everybody a very happy holidays. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.